Hey guys, welcome back to One All's Pub. I've had a few inquiries both here on YouTube and on Instagram about the zero tolerance 0566 and whether or not it deassists well. It does, and I've said as much here on YouTube and on Instagram, and I'll show you here. Flips just fine, deassisted. But there is a little bit of a technique to getting it to flip that well, at least in the two that I've done so far. I did my own and I did one for a friend. And because when you first deassist this, it's a little tight and it's a little, really kind of more effort than it needs to be to go ahead and get it to flip. It will break in over time, but you can greatly assist that process. I have found, at least so far, in the two that I've done, and I'm just going to pass that along to my viewers out there and anybody else that's interested. What you do is, of course, when you get the knife, take it apart, remove the torsion bar from it. When you do that, I'm not going to do it here for you. This doesn't require me to do all this for you. I can explain it pretty well. When you take this scale off, that torsion bar will come out, and the inside of this is just packed with grease to help lubricate that torsion bar process. Make sure you clean all that out really good. As a matter of fact, take the whole knife apart, get some Windex or something, and just give it a real good cleaning, get everything done, and then I use Daiwa Real Oil. Other people, you can use Nano Oil or Nano Lube or whatever your lube of choice is that works for you. I don't care. I take that Daiwa Real Oil, which is a real light oil, and I just put it, a little circle of it around the pivot in various areas. I just lube up the pivot as I prefer to lube it up. That's all I'll say. Do it how you would normally do it. But make sure you clean all the gunk that comes in this knife, because underneath this scale from the factory is just loaded with goopy lube. So get rid of that. Make sure you get rid of all that. Then when you put it all back together, sans the torsion bar, like I said, it may be kind of hard to get to go. So to get it to snap nice and good, what I did is I did what's called the Hinderer centering trick. It's not necessarily specific to Hinderers, I don't think necessarily. It's really more of a frame lock centering trick, because I use it on frame locks whenever they get a little bit out of center. Now this didn't need to be centered. It went back together just fine, and the blade was perfectly centered. But when I did this trick, it helped to kind of, the word for it, reset the smoothness, if you want to say. When I first put it back together after just cleaning it all up and lubing it up, putting it back together without the torsion bar, it was just a little tight feeling. So when I did this little trick, that allowed me to set the blade and the pivot more loosely and maintain the blade centeredness. Because from the factory on both of the two I've done, to get the blade centered, left the pivot pretty tight, and that was what was affecting the flippability of this thing. So what you do, it's a real easy trick. Set the bar, or set the blade at about 90 degrees. Crank the pivot down real tight. I mean, like really tight. So it's like you can't. So you have to force it closed. All right. So set the pivot or the blade at 90 degrees. Crank the pivot down really tight. Then loosen the scale screws. Not like, don't take them all the way out. Just loosen them so that they don't have the bite. Just so that they're loosened inside the frame, but still threaded in the frame. Don't take them all the way out. Once you get that done, force this back down, and it'll be a tight. That should be an effort to do that. Then take your blade and press it like so over towards the lock bar, or towards the titanium side, the lock side. Then simply tighten your screws back down. Once you get that, it'll be favoring, when you get all done with that, it'll favor this quite a bit because you have your pivot so tightened. Then as you loosen your pivot to bring this thing back to center, again, I can't swear this will work on every knife, but on the two that I've done, both have reacted exactly the same way. Once you bring it back to center by playing with the pivot to draw it to the center, then it just hits this really nice sweet spot. So, and it just makes this flip very well. Now again, it's not going to flip like a Domino or a Southern if you have those, or any of your more expensive customs, or even like a 0560 with its, the ball bearing pivots and whatnot. This is just a phosphor bronze bushing pivot. So if you just try to do, or it's certainly not going to flip the same way as when it was spring assisted. When it's spring assisted, you can just grab it here and pull, and it'll snap out because you got the torsion bar slamming that thing open. Not so now. So now you have to actually kind of do the push type instead of a pull type technique, and that is pressing down, same way I flip a Hinderer. This is why I have this guy out. When you flip a Hinderer, if you just, and I've gone over this in multiple other videos of mine, so this is not new, but if you just do that, they don't flip well. That is absolutely true. But that's not how they were designed. If you look at the jimping on them, the jimping is on this side of the flipper, indicating that's where you should be, applying pressure. You apply pressure down and in at a 45-degree angle, and they snap out really good. You do that with this guy now after you've gone through this little trick I just showed, and it snaps out really well too. So that's kind of the secret so far. 2 out of 2 for me in getting the zero tolerance 0556. Excuse me, 0566 to flip well. It will flip decently, without doing that little trick, but it does. You really got to bear down, and maybe it would break in over time. But I did both of these. I did mine, and I did my friends, and they, like I said, they both reacted exactly the same. So, I'm thinking maybe that's just how these are going to be. Also, I just wanted to cover, since I have my Hinderer out here, my new lovely Warncliffe again. Just thought I'd show that off a bit. I've also had some requests, and I just went over it with this guy about how to center a Hinderer, and it's this same technique. I'll go over it again here with the Hinderer. Just set the blade at 90 degrees. Crank your pivot down tight. You may need the spanner tool over here to hold this in place. Crank that pivot down tight. So it's tight, so you can't just it should not fall very easily at all. You should have to really muscle that down to finish it. Tight, like crank it as tight as you can get it, kind of thing. Don't strip the screw. Don't go crazy and screw it up. But just really crank that down tight. Release these three. The tension on them. Just loosen them up enough so that they're still in the frame, but just kind of hanging out there. Push this back down into place. And again, in this case, depending on which way you need it to go, if when you had it set up the way you liked it, as far as the flippability and the pivot and whatnot, if it was favoring this side or this side, whichever way you're trying to move it to, pull it that opposite direction. In other words, if it was favoring the G10 side, pull it hard to the lock side, then retighten these three as you're holding it down, ding ding ding, and then loosen your pivot back up to centered. If it was favoring the lock side, after you've done the little trick here where you tighten this down, loosen these guys, push that back down in place, and then pull it towards the G10 side and tighten them. And then when you adjust the pivot back to loosen it, then it'll more center back this way. So you're just trying to counter effect whichever way it seems to be favoring. On this guy, like I said, to get the smooth flipping, pulling it to the lock side seemed to be the way to do it. In both cases. So, and again, both of these that I did were completely centered when I got done putting them back together and getting the pivot set to where it was about as good as I could get it, where it was nice and stout, no blade play here. But I couldn't get it to flip as well as I wanted without getting into the blade play. So in order to keep it rock solid, which this one is just absolutely rock solid, and to get no blade play and to get a nice centered blade and a nice flippability here, this little trick seemed to work for me. So anyway, just thought I would pass that little bit of info on. What's not too confusing. If you have any questions, just post them up down in the comments below, or send me a PM. I'll try to walk you through it. But again, I think that's pretty self-explanatory. You're just dealing with the pivot and 3 screws and pulling the blade, one way or the other, and then retightening the frame screws and then setting your pivot where you want it. So that's it. That's 1 loss 2 cents, guys. Keep the change. Sláinte.